There was this technique that they had learned on how to shove people, how to push people. So very like Bruce Lee-esque in a sense, where you're going to, you know, like minimal effort on my part, but I'm going to shove this person across the room.
Yep.
And here I am in 7th grade, and I get to implement this technique against Brandon Pearson because we start shoving each other. I'm like, oh, this motherfucker doesn't know what he's in for.
Yeah, I know Bruce Lee shoving.
I have learned how to shove.
Yeah, the art of shoving.
I literally, like, I remember in my head, I'm like, here we go. And I like did those, and I shoved him. And it's not like some magical shove or anything, right? It's just this, I just used my body weight and shoved. Exactly.
Like
that's
Street
what it felt
Fighter.
like.
Yeah.
That's totally what I felt like.
Yeah.
And he flew back into the drinking fountain, at least in my memory, right?
I mean, that sounds super Street Fighter-ish,
cool.
right?
It was pretty cool.
Okay.
Deeper.
I wasn't breathing because you said silence, and I'm worried that I'm a heavy mouth breather.
Yeah, I've noticed that about you.
I am. My nose doesn't work, and I just breathe through my mouth.
That's okay.
I'm a mouth breather.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Mouth breathing's good for you, too.
Is it?
I'm sure. I mean, it gets oxygen in your system,
I
right?
mean, what's up with all the mouth tape?
What is up with all the mouth tape?
You know,
seems pretty suspicious to me.
I tried to put some mouth tape on, right? So I tore it up. And I like 2 seconds in, and all of a sudden, I was dizzy. Like I was like, nope. There's just
so you're straight up just mouth breathing the whole night?
A whole night, yeah. I think I've broke my nose like 3 times. I've had my septum redone twice or 2 or 3 times. And plus, like, I'm allergic to everything. I have terrible sinuses and allergies and snot always. And it's just like, yeah.
When you broke your nose, did you know, like, because I don't, like, I never went to the doctor and the doctor was like, hey, you broke your nose. But I don't know for sure if I've broken my nose.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know when your nose is broken?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When it's like,
straight up the crooked.
Yeah. Crooked, super bleeding, you know, like there's bad things going on.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. It sucks. It's not as like, it doesn't like lay over to the side or anything like that, but it is super bad.
When the first fight, was it the first fight? No, it was the second fight that I had. It was very swollen. Like it was very much like something was wrong with it. It probably was.
There's a reason why maybe people think that we're brothers. Because of our noses.
I got a big nose.
I got a big nose. I was told at the age of 16 when I was having a doctor look at my nose to tell me like what they were going to do to fix my nose. He was like, yeah, it's very Romanesque. And I was like, okay, yeah, I got a very Romanesque nose, which is doctor speak for you got a big honker.
Right.
Yeah. And
I like my nose though. I haven't always liked it. I've got like a thing. I don't know if it's visible, but it's like, I don't know if we can zoom in on the side profile, but it's definitely got like a noticeable.
Oh yeah, little
notch.
It happens.
Yeah, it does.
Mine used to have a little more on the top up here.
Yeah. It's so fascinating how our bodies change as we continue to like grow.
Yeah.
The whole thing with ears never stopping.
Oh yeah.
I get super obsessed with it. Like when I'm watching content and stuff like that, I look at people's ears and I'm like, look at their ears, babe. They're so huge.
Right. I think it's more big ears don't bother little ears.
Right.
Have you ever seen people with just these like itty bitty little ears and you're
what's
like
up with that?
You're like, yo, you got like an adult sized head and tiny ears.
It's very strange.
People with little heads, they also kind of freak me out a little bit. If you've got like a tiny melon, like if you're a man, I'm just gonna throw this out there. If you're a man and your hat size starts with a 6, that's a tiny little head.
That's a little head.
That's a little head.
They back when I played baseball in high school.
Okay.
I played baseball for like, actually it wasn't even high school baseball. It was like summer league or something like that because baseball and tennis happened at the same time. And so I couldn't do both. And I ended up going with tennis, and we all know how that turned out with pickleball later on.
Yes.
In my
paddle sports.
My amazing career in paddle sports. But they didn't have a hat big enough for me.
Really?
And so
that makes sense.
The biggest hat that they had, my mom had to cut it and add in fabric. So my baseball hat had like these 2 triangles on each side in order to make it big enough.
Your
to
hat
fit
had
my head.
wings because it needed to be like let out.
Exactly. It was such a big head. It still is a big head.
It is. My dad had the biggest head that I've ever seen. I mean, I think it was like a 20-pound watermelon.
Yeah.
He used to take the regular hats, like snapbacks and stuff, and just unsnap them and set them on the top of his head. And like that was just it. I used to take, he had a cowboy hat. Somebody had bought him once, like a nicer cowboy hat. And I could take like a fitted hat and I could take it and put it sideways. And it still sat perfectly on my head because it was his, I think he wore like it's like an 8 3/4, like this giant head, right? Yeah. I mean, I think I'm a 7 7/8 or 7 3/4, something like that.
Yeah. I don't even remember. I can't even remember the last time I tried to put a hat on.
The only reason I know is in the Marine Corps, like you get covers, your hats, right? Covers, that's what we call them, and they're sized, right? Not your woodland or your cami hats; those are just small, large, extra large. But your fitted dress hats, those are all sized.
Yeah.
So you get to know your sizes. Like I know how big my neck is. Well, I know how big my neck was. It's probably bigger now.
Probably.
Yeah.
Are you? This year is off to the races, man. In so many different ways, right?
Yes.
How are you feeling about everything as far as 2025 goes so far?
I'm really excited that I only have 2 hands and 2 legs because there's a limited number of plates that I can keep spinning. If I had more hands, I would have to have more plates in the air spinning. Yeah. And that sounds terrifying. It's been, I mean, God, it's only been, what, 2 weeks? Not even?
Right?
What's today?
I stopped paying attention.
It's the 13th, so no, it has not been 2 weeks.
Almost. Right? By the time this comes out and people listen, right?
That's true. It'll be the 14th when people are hearing this, so 2 weeks for you. It's just a ton of stuff, man. Obviously, like had a work trip where I was in Austin. We are in the middle of snowpocalypse. Well, I think we're at the tail end of...
I don't know. It's supposed to be coming again next week or something, supposedly.
It looks super light.
Yeah.
But it's going to be in like the 50s on Friday.
That's nice.
Yeah, so I think all this snow that we do have is going to melt. My wife's car took a shit. So her Chevy shook a shit. I understand if that movie reference isn't grasped.
Tell me again.
That is, it's an old Jeff Daniels movie called Escanaba in the Moonlight. Yeah, exactly.
Holy shit, we're going deep.
Yeah, dude, it's a really funny. It's about the buckless Youper. And
sorry, you're saying words I don't understand.
Yeah. That checks out. Any Michigan listeners, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, people who live up there, we call them Youpers.
Youpers?
Yeah, because the UP, the Upper Peninsula, they live up there. They're Youpers. It's not spelled with a UP. Well, there is a U, but anyways.
We need the proper spelling on this right now.
So Youpers live up there, and there's a movie called Escanaba, which is I don't want to say city, but a town up in the UP, and in the moonlight, and he's the buckless Youper. So everybody up in Michigan hunts. We have really big white-tailed deer, a lot of other things, and he's the like 35-year-old Youper who's never gotten a buck, right? And his family makes fun of him. Like the kids on the school drive by the bus and they're like, the buckless Youper, right? And they are like harassing this guy.
And this is Jeff Daniels?
It's Jeff Daniels. It's a hilarious movie. They drink maple syrup whiskey and there's all kind of, it's a crazy like spiritual kind of thing, right? And it's totally worth watching. It's silly.
I'd be surprised if we can find it anywhere. It's so
big. No, you can totally find it.
Yeah,
it's a real movie. I highly recommend it. It probably won't make a lot of sense. I'll be 100% honest.
It was made for a very specific audience.
Very specific audience. I think I asked Jamie to watch it once with me, and she got like 30 minutes into it. And she's like, this is the silliest thing I've ever seen. Right? But I got off track. He makes, there's a character who you can't understand what he says, right? He's always like, and he says that his Chevy took a shit, right? And it's like, my Chevy took a shit. And you're like, what? And he's like, my Chevy took a shit. Anyways, my wife's car took a shit. It's not a Chevy, it's a Ford. So that thing's broken and it needs a new engine, and that's really upsetting.
Yeah, if you want to sponsor the podcast with a new engine, we're looking for new sponsors for the podcast.
Listen, I will talk about Built Ford Tough all day long. Ford Motor Company, calling you out.
We will deck our entire set out in Ford.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, my
the
office.
new podcast name is Ford Mendare.
Got that. Got the new gym.
I know, dude. I'm so excited for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's super
How's
fun.
that feeling?
It feels great. It's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine, guy I work with, who also used to own a CrossFit gym. And so I was at the gym this morning. We're at the school, and we had Wi-Fi installed. Some of the stuff that we're doing, we're going to need Wi-Fi, and I think we'll eventually get us so like our members can use guest Wi-Fi or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is just an extra nice little bonus. Free Wi-Fi. Starbucks does it. We should do it, right?
Is there going to be coffee there too?
There is a coffee maker there that the 5 a.m. crew has. If you came,
I've seen it.
Yes, it's.
I think we need to upgrade that.
Yeah, that's a itty bitty. I think Michael got that for like $10 and save a lot. But we're gonna get. So we got Wi-Fi installed. Started working on the front desk area, so we can start like making it just like that kind of part of it. And I'm excited about that. Excited about all these little changes that we're doing. Like we're gonna get some scheduling stuff out, and it's not that we're doing anything like super crazy, right? But we're refining things that were kind of maybe done, maybe weren't done, but we're just really making little tweaks to things, taking them from 6s and 7s to 9s and 10s, 8s and 9s, in that area to just, the goal is we need to make sure that the process in everything is the right. So the website's up to date. There's like good call to actions. There's no question when somebody comes to our website, what it is that we offer, how we offer it, when they can do that. We need to make sure that's super simple for people to get signed up. There's no questions in that. It's because we're using a member management system called Zen Planner that will automatically track, like we'll have people checking in for attendance. We'll be able to see who's come in, who hasn't. It'll help us with belt promotions, all this stuff, and it'll help us keep our members engaged. Once all that stuff's set up, then you're like, okay, cool.
Let's go.
And then it's just a function of awareness, right? Like, do we then start running, ads on Google or Facebook or Instagram? Do we get a steady content process going, right? Which I'm really excited about getting. But like, in order to get good content, you got to have some like photos, and in order to get that, well, then you got to have some photos taken and like all these little things, right? It's funny because like even some of them are like, oh, here's some photos from the promotion last week or 2 weeks ago. Like, all right, cool. And you look at them and they're from the across the room that are just zoomed in. So they're granular and you're like, well, this is good, but I can't use this. Like, this is not website or what I would consider like social media quality, right? Yeah. So we really got to get some of that stuff updated. But I am excited. Some of the small things like we are going through, I just saw this one the other day, for the gym, they printed out a larger poster, like a 16 by 24 or something like that, of the sizes of gis and like who should wear what. And it has all the heights and weights and like what about size that they would be in. And they just printed that off and had it turned into a thing and put it in their locker room where all their loaner gis were. Right. So if you walk in and you've never put a gi on before, I could walk in with you and be like, here's the deal. A1s all the way to A5s. Here's a height and weight chart that you can use to figure out which one of these works and just figure out which one works for you.
That's so good, dude.
Right. Like
so
perfect. It just makes it super simple for that intake process. So those are the kind of things that I'm like, and like, I was like, all right, cool. I have to go through all these gis that have been washed 100 million times and try and figure out what size they are, right?
Because the size is all worn off
or whatever. And then we're going to like do like a marker and we'll just put like AJJF A3, right? So that'll be our loaner gis and we'll get those all set up for everybody. New gis getting ordered, just all this stuff, man. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's exciting though.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. It's Athens Jiu-Jitsu. Right? Athens. Yep. Is the website just athensjujitsu.com?
So it's Athens Jew hyphen Jitsu, JIU, not JEU. But yeah, so if you just search for Athens, Tennessee Jiu-Jitsu, it shows up. And we've got a new website that'll be launching here probably. I just got the first version of it. I've got to go through and make like what edits need to happen to it, but that'll get done. Our texting is live, so you can text us. Our web chat will get live here probably by the end of the week. I'm really excited. I mean, it's like the small basic things that I know are game changers. When somebody goes to the website and they say, hey, I'm interested, and as soon as they fill that out, within a minute, you send them a text back. Hey, Craig, it's Ben from Athens Jiu-Jitsu. I saw you were interested in checking out our school. Do you have some questions I can answer for you, or when would you like to come in?
Yeah.
Right? And they're like, oh, because when they fill that form out, that's when they're the most interested.
We just lost a light. I got to fix it.
Okay.
This episode of Brave Mendare is brought to you by Heritage Steel. Look, it's a brand new year, and you're probably like everybody else, including Ben and I, trying to get healthy, trying to do what you need to do so that you can create the life that you want to create. Why not upgrade those old non-stick pans that you've been carrying around since college? They're killing you. And instead swap them out with some Heritage Steel titanium stainless steel ironclad 5-ply beautiful lifetime warranty cookware. Heritage Steel is committed to, I can't say committed to this morning. They are committed to sustainability, and they use environmentally conscious practices in the production of all of their cookware. Heritage Steel was started over 40 years ago. It's a family-owned business right here in Tennessee. If you're a fan of cooking, if you consider yourself a chef, hey chef, thank you chef, then you need to pick up some stainless steel titanium Heritage Steel pans. Listeners of Brave Mendare can save 10% right now and head over to heritagesteel.us/brave. Enter promo code BRAVE and save 10% on your next order. Heritage Steel, chef-grade cookware for less. Okay,
All right.
we're back.
And go.
And I don't remember what we were talking about.
Yeah, we were talking about the gym. But yeah, lots of cool stuff. Really
It's gonna be
excited to get it
exciting,
going.
dude.
It's going to be good.
Yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that I've always wanted to kind of do at that gym. And so now it's exciting to be able to, you know, have a space where things are operating and functioning and running and all those kind of things. So it's going to be really, really cool.
Yeah.
Today I was thinking about it, and it's kind of in conjunction with the gym because it's really got me thinking about jiu-jitsu. It's got me thinking about a bunch of different things. And I was thinking about not just sharing kind of like our experience and our journey with jiu-jitsu, but more like, as I clean my eyes on the podcast,
You got an
more
eye
like,
booger?
do I?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I think I'm
Mr.
good.
Sandman. Did you ever see that 8 heads in a duffel bag? Oh, God. Joe Pesci.
Yes.
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 Right? Just,
Yeah.
and it's got
like
the,
Joe
like,
Pesci. He's the star, right?
I think he's
it's
like
a Joe
main
Pesci
character.
movie.
Yeah. And it's
yeah.
got, God, what's the other guy from Black Sheep and Chris Farley's friend? David Spade. Right? And he's like, Mr. Sandman. And, and all the like heads are dancing.
Okay.
Sorry.
You're good. Rather than just the rabbit hole of our jiu-jitsu story and our experiences with jiu-jitsu and kind of like our path of jiu-jitsu, I was thinking broader and just like violence and fighting and, you know, aggression and like this aspect of masculinity that I think is so a part of our culture, a part of being a man, a part of growing up, and just kind of all the ins and outs of what it's looked like over the course of our life. Because it's like hard to quantify into one thing, right? It's hard to say like this episode is about fighting or this episode, you know, but because it's so many different components of it. And so I thought we could just go down all of those different rabbit holes and what it's looked like over the course of our life.
I mean, violent.
Right?
It's been a little violent.
It's been very violent.
Yeah, right.
Very violent. Stephanie jokes because there was an interview with Masvidal, and I don't remember what it was, some UFC, maybe the one where he fought Nate or something. And the interview, he was just like, I'm very violent. It's going to be very violent. So Steph always jokes, and she does
Lots
her
of
best.
violence.
Yeah, she does her best Jorge.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been violent for me as well, dude.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see kind of like, not just how we have some similarities, obviously, but what it's also felt like for you along the way. So to start off, let's see if I can get my words correctly.
I'm ready.
Do you remember the first time you fought somebody or felt like you were in a fight? Not like roughhousing, but like, okay, I'm in a fight with somebody right now.
The first time I was ever in a fight, I remember, so I remember the first time I stood up for myself and like was able to kind of like stand my own ground a little bit. And I got picked on a ton when I was a kid. Like, this is terrible. I distinctly remember like crying in my mom's arms, like as a third grader, like, nobody likes me, everybody's mean to me. Ah.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a lot of friends and I got picked on a lot. I was a super awkward, like, I was a huge nerd. Like, all these kids are talking about like Magic the Gathering cards, and I'm reading like the like catalogs on like parts and engine and motors and pulleys and drive systems and stuff. Like, I was just a weird kid, right? But I remember, I think I was in like 4th grade or 5th grade. And I remember this guy. We're actually friends on Facebook. His name's Bill Tolbert. He was in the Army. He's a giant dude. He was picking on me, and I don't remember. He like pushed me or something, and I jumped up and I roundhouse kicked him. I straight up like gave him like a spinning roundhouse kick.
Okay.
In the face. No idea. No training on this whatsoever, but I am Mr. Miyagi's pupil, and I know what I'm doing. And I kicked him, and he just never saw it coming, right? And when some kid kicks you in the face and you don't know what's coming, like, it makes an impression, right? It knocked him down, and he was like, wow, what was that? Right? And
do you remember like thinking you're like, I'm going to kick this, or did it just happen so quick?
It just happened. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And because he punched me, and there's no way I can punch that hard. I'm like, yeah. Like, I wrestled, right? Like, I didn't know how to like physically punch. Like, my dad never showed me how to punch somebody.
Yeah.
Right? My dad taught me how to like, grab somebody by the face and like make their lives miserable, and how to do like stuff like that, how to do pins and whatnot, right? But never learned how to punch somebody or kick anybody, but apparently the movies. So I flying craned this dude in the fucking mouth, and he was just like, what the hell was that? And then some woman, we were in this trailer park where we lived, and this woman like came out and she's like, oh my God, and like yelled at me, and I was like, I was defending myself, and like called like Billy, he ran away, and then I had to go see my mom, and my mom's like, yeah, that kid's been picking on my son for years, like, just, I don't care. And the woman was like, oh,
and that was like 3rd grade?
It was like 4th or 5th grade, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the first time that I remember like physically being in a fight, like with that. But like it changed for me because I was this skinny kid, this like kind of like the word that always comes to my mind, which is, I don't know if this is like negative self-talk or whatever, but is twerp, right? Like, I was the skinny twerp. Like, I was weird. I was nerdy. I didn't know, like, I was gangly, but I wasn't tall. I wasn't big. It was like weird. I was super bony, and I just didn't know what I was doing or anything like that. And then in 7th grade, I hit puberty, and I only grew like an inch taller, but I put 80 pounds on it in a summer, and, it was just like veins and muscles all over the place. And everybody was like, well, maybe we don't fuck with that guy anymore. And I stopped getting picked on. It was weird. Put on 80 pounds of muscle in the summer. The bullies leave you alone.
Strange how that changes everything, right?
I mean, like, there was still that awkwardness of like, people would be like, oh yeah, you want to do something? I'd be like, I mean, if that's what you want to do. And they'd be like, no, well. Like, there wasn't a lot of fights that happened after that. There were some, but not a ton.
The first one that I remember, because I used to fight with my brothers all the time, and that was just kind of like a way of life, right? So that doesn't necessarily, I mean, it does count in a sense. That definitely set the framework for violence and things like that. But it was 1st grade, and there was this kid named Shamus Hell, and he... Shamus.
Fucking Shamus.
Not Seamus, but Shamus Hell.
Yeah.
And maybe it was Seamus, and I just mispronounced his name. But
it doesn't matter.
He was flirting with the girl that I liked, and it was out at recess, and I had had enough of that. So him and I got into this fight, and it's kind of one of those push and shoving fights. And then I think he threw sand in my face.
Oh, what a jerk.
Or I could have been the one that threw the sand in his face. There was some sand thrown in the eyes. But the result was he's on the ground kind of curled up, and I'm just kicking him as hard as I can, kind of soccer kicks into his ribs. And finally the teacher comes and pulls me off and everything like that. That's the first time I remember fighting somebody. And then
Seamus is like, no, you threw sand in my face.
I know, right?
Yeah, right.
He's on another podcast right now telling a very different story about this incredible bully from first grade, right? Who just was an asshole.
36 years ago.
Then same time frame, first grade again. I had a lot of violence. I had a lot of anger in me that had to come out. And my best friend his name's Alan, and he also grew up in a family of brothers.
Mm-hmm.
He's got like 6 brothers, 5 or 6 brothers. There's 7 kids total in that family, I think, 7 or 8 kids. It's a big family. I forget. I think he's got 7. There's 7 boys, and then they had a girl. His sister was the last kid that they had. And it could, Alan, I apologize if I'm totally butchering it. It could be 6 or 7. Lots of kids. I can name them all. I know all of his family's name. Like I know all.
You
their
can
kids'
name them, but
names.
you can't count them.
I can't remember. We could probably count them off, right? Let's do it. So Richard was the oldest, and then you've got Scott, and then you've got Alan, and then you got Carl, and then you got Brent, and then Kevin. So let's go back. So we got Richard, Scott, Alan, Kevin, Carl, Brent, and Mikkel. So 7 kids total. Yeah. And I think, I can't remember if Kevin or Carl is older. Anyway, Alan and I used to fight all the time because that's just kind of how we knew how to hang out with boys, because he came from a family where, you know, they were doing the same thing over at his house, roughhousing.
So was it like fighting, or was it roughhousing? It Were you guys like swinging on each other?
We weren't. I mean,
no face shots.
No face shots.
Yeah.
Yeah, no face shots.
Yeah, but like a punch in the ribs or the gut.
Yeah, definitely.
A Charlie horse.
No, like it was more like, I mean, wrestling. I remember our elementary school had this paved portion of the playground. So the way that it worked was, you know, you've got like the pavement outside of the school that's asphalt, and then there was a slope that went up, and then up on is where all the toys and the field and everything was. So there was this slope, and it was great for riding bikes. It was great for sledding. It had tons of great purposes. I have no idea why it was there.
Everybody loves this hill.
Right, but it was perfect, and it was asphalt. And Alan and I used to roll down that quite a bit, fighting and arguing. And one day the teacher just brought us in and was like, you guys are done fighting. You have to stay in from recess, and you guys are going to be friends now, essentially. Yeah. So we ended up
So violence
fighting.
brought you together.
Exactly.
Hey.
And we're still friends today.
I mean, there you go.
So it's like 40 plus years later or whatever, still friends. And then I don't have a lot of, I don't have another memory from elementary school. And the next time I remember fighting, and this is the other thing too, is like, because my brothers and I never really punched each other. Yeah. I wasn't out there punching kids. I wasn't boxing kids up or anything like that. Right. But there was a kid in middle school that wanted to fight me. This was so fucking funny, dude. This is how it was, like 7th grade. Okay. And we were in line at the drinking fountain, and he was talking shit, right? Brandon Pearson. And I remember thinking, because my brothers had been taking like Kung Fu, Taekwondo. They were taking some martial art from some guy that was teaching it, right? And
like on TV or like in person, right? Were they watching Rex Kwon Do or?
It was kind of Rex Kwon Do-y, but no, it was a legitimate person that was teaching it. Yeah. The guy's the sensei's name was Mr. Weiss.
Oh, your sensei.
And so they were taking a couple of these classes from him, and then they would come home and just practice everything and then show everything on me, right? Yeah. And there was this technique that they had learned on how to shove people, how to push people. So very like Bruce Lee-esque in a sense, where you're going to, you know, like minimal effort on my part, but I'm going to shove this person across the room. Yep. And here I am in 7th grade, and I get to implement this technique against Brandon Pearson, because we start shoving each other. I'm like, oh, this motherfucker doesn't know what he's in for.
Yeah, I know Bruce Lee shoving.
I have learned how to shove.
Yeah, the art of shoving.
I literally, I remember in my head, I'm like, here we go. And I did those, and I shoved him. And it's not like some magical shove or anything, right? It's just this,
like
I just used my body weight
Sonic
and
boom!
shoved. Exactly.
Like
That's
Street
what it felt
Fighter.
like.
Yeah.
That's totally what I felt like.
Yeah.
And he flew back into the drinking fountain, at least in my memory, right?
I mean, that sounds super Street Fighter-ish,
cool.
right?
It was pretty cool. And that was the end of that fight. So I never really had any fights, elementary, high school, anything like that were ever fisticuffs. Like we never boxed with anybody. Same thing. Once I kind of hit puberty and got a little bit bigger, I never really had anybody pick fights with me. There was a kid in high school that wanted to fight me, and I was like, yeah, cool. I'm ready when you are, dude.
Yeah.
Totally down to fight you. He was kind of a dick too. I definitely was not a fan of this kid. So none of
a little
that.
extra satisfying.
What's that?
A little extra satisfaction.
It would have been great.
Yeah.
I really wanted to fight that kid.
Yeah.
I really wanted him to come up and have some fun because he was a scrawny kid. I'm like, what? Why does this guy want to fight
for
me?
those guys, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
scrawny guys, they go hard.
Yeah. No.
Right.
Old Wayne Fife was not going to be a problem. And it wasn't until, truthfully, I never actually punched anybody or hit anybody, and at least in the face, until my brother and I fought after Fight Club, after we watched Fight Club. I know we talked about that on an earlier episode, but that was the first time that I ever really punched somebody, like actually. There was always my brothers, back when they were doing those Taekwondo classes or whatever they were, they got all the sparring equipment. So we had these super, I mean,
like the guard, like the shin.
Well, all they were feet, and they were like for your hands and for your feet.
Okay.
But they were like, back then they were amazing. They were like the coolest thing in the whole wide world because we finally had something that we could punch each other with.
Yeah.
And so, but I don't even remember, they had like finger guards. So you would slide your fingers up into them and they'd come up over the top and then strap around your wrists. So they were kind of like old school kickboxing.
Way better than like sock and boppers.
Yeah. And I mean, we beat the shit out of each other with those all the time, but it was never really a whole bunch in the face.
Okay.
And then that first time fighting with my brother and punching him in the face felt amazing. And I was so excited about it. And I thought, this is the best thing ever. And it wasn't until I got into Jiu-Jitsu and started training in MMA and everything like that, that I actually started to have some fights. But those were like, you know, fights in the cage and everything like that. But I mean, there was so much pent up aggression and anger and violence inside of me where it was constantly trying to, like, I think about this from the perspective of masculinity, because my boy, he's 18 and he's kind of gone down some similar rabbit holes with it, where it's just something about being a kid, being a man growing up, where it's like I said, it just comes along the path with you, right? It's just this thing that travels with you on the journey of being a man. Mm-hmm. And I don't like it. Like, it's not something that I think is really actually necessary. Do you know what I mean? I think it was necessary way back in the day.
Yeah.
But I don't really think it's necessary anymore.
Is it necessary to have a beard?
A beard?
Yeah. No, it's just like leftover from our like history, right?
Okay.
But yeah, no, I agree. Like, do I think that we should have, do I think that the need for violence, like you should have the need for, no. But I also don't necessarily need insurance.
Nobody needs insurance.
Until you need insurance.
I don't know. I think it's a racket.
I mean, it is totally a racket.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have the skill set, of course, right? But I'm really just trying to understand how we could do things very, very differently so that we could start raising boys and changing up the way that things are done so that they don't have to travel with that. Because there was fear associated with it too, right? Mm-hmm. Where I never wanted to fight anybody. It wasn't something that
Except for that one guy.
Except for that one guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, when it really boiled down to it, I mean, the reason I didn't fight more is just because I was afraid. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't something that I was comfortable doing. It wasn't something that I really, really wanted to do. But it was something that was always kind of present and something that was always there.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you that there is not a fight that I can think of that I have ever been in that I wanted to happen.
Right.
Because I learned early. I think I remember the first time that I punched somebody in the face and my hand hurt for a while. Like, I think I caught some teeth, like it cut my hand. Like, I was like, oh, I don't like this. Like, ow. so from that moment, like any time that I had to be in a physical altercation, like I was like, I don't want to listen. Let me tell you what's going to happen here. Like, I'm not walking away from this unscathed. Like one way or the other, I'm going to feel this tomorrow. And I don't want to do that. You probably, just guessing, don't want to do, like, what's what I would say to somebody, right? Like, well, you don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I was like, what's the upside? You get an extra couple swings in there and you're just sore from that tomorrow. What's the downside? I get some extra swings in there, because let me tell you, I'm not pulling anything. Like I'm swinging. Like I only want to hit you once.
Did you have any like in high school or anything like that?
Yeah, I had a couple. I remember my first time I punched somebody. Actually, well, the first time I punched somebody, they never punched me back. Not the time I was just talking about, but this kid Chad Barber. He had made fun of me all through middle school, like 2nd grade or 6th grade and 7th grade. I had just a dozen complaints against this kid to the like principal's office. It was a constant issue. He made fun of me for like what clothes I wore, just being poor, dirty, gross, like whatever, right? He's like, oh, didn't you wear those pants yesterday? And I was like, dude, I have 2 pairs of fucking jeans. Like, yeah, I wore these pants yesterday. Dude, leave me the fuck alone, right? And it was like the 2nd day of 8th grade. Like, I think we had like Monday was a half day, Tuesday, and it was Wednesday. And we were leaving lunch, and he walked by and he said something to me. And my mom basically had given me the like ominous dominus to just like, hey, this kid ever says anything to you, like make sure he never opens his mouth again. And I was like, all right. So he walked by, said something, and I just like laid out and punched this guy in the back of the head. And I totally sucker punched him in the back of the head. He then fell and hit his head on like the wheel bolt for the lunch table, which made things instantaneously way worse.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because now there's blood.
That's
and
like the fear, right? You don't want to punch somebody because then they fall over and die.
Yeah, totally. Right? He didn't die, but he was bleeding and it was a big deal. And I got like, obviously like, oh shit, like lunch is over and this kid's on the ground. Big deal. And I go there and they're like, what? I was like, yeah, man, I have talked about this bully issue I've had for 2 years now. And they're like, we're going to expel this kid. And my mom called up and she's like, if you try to expel my kid, I will be on with the Channel 5 News in a second, because there's no way. Like, this is what it's come to. Like, my son went 2 years, did everything that you asked, to the point that I used to go sit in the like office for lunch to not get bullied. Not because I was in trouble, but I would go there so I wasn't getting bullied. And this kid, like, you know, he opened his mouth and this happened.
I love that that's the solution in the 80s, right?
Right. Yeah.
Where they're like, we'll just make this kid sit all by himself in the office.
Yeah. So
alone,
he does,
right?
Right.
Rather than deal with the bully.
Yeah. And so my mom was like, yeah. So they gave me 2 days in school suspension. He got a week of suspension out of school or whatever. And then there were some super fun things where like our lives were intertwined for a while. I got, between 8th grade and 9th grade, I didn't want to say, I borrowed my mother's minivan.
Okay.
And went for a joyride.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting choice of words there. I feel like there's some things in between the lines there, but we'll go with borrowed. I like that.
Yeah, I borrowed.
Copy.
Acquired. So I borrowed my mom's minivan, went for a joyride, and I pulled into a buddy's parking lot, or buddy's house, like 4 doors down, and I backed up into a truck when I left. And I left. I like took off because I was like, fuck. But I
ditched the minivan?
No. I left the minivan. Well, I took the minivan with me. I was driving it. But I backed into this truck, dented in the door, and then took off. Well, then I drove around the block and pulled into my house. So the cop's like, 4 doors down, that minivan over there with the busted out taillights, is that the one that hit you? And I got arrested by Chad Barber's dad.
What?
Who was a cop.
Okay.
Right? Who then gave me the riot act like my kids would never do this. Well, then between 9th and 10th grade, his sons tried to borrow their minivan as well, or their conversion van, and instead of driving it backwards out of the garage, drove it forwards through the garage into the pool. Right? And I was like, haha. Yeah,
fuck you, Chad Barber.
Fuck you, Chad Barber. And then just fast forward, because I always love how these things happen, right? Because these things will happen in life. Fast forward even 5 years, I'm now in the Marine Corps. I've come home from my first deployment, and we're at like a field bonfire, and he's sitting there and he's telling me how he wants to be a master diver because he saw the movie like Men of Honor, and that's what he wants to do and all this stuff. And I was just like, yeah, man, like I don't actually give a shit. And I was like, you can talk about all this stuff that you want to do. I was like, but until you go sign, you know, UCMJ, you sign the motherfucking contract. Until that happens, you ain't shit.
Yeah.
Right. And he was just like, well, and I was like, look at you. And I might have been a little drunk. And I was like, look at you. Big kid in fucking small little town. I was like, you live in Holly, Michigan. Like, and you're talking about all these cool things you might do one day. I was like, I just got back from my fucking Iraq. I've been to like 7 countries in the last like 6 months. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, I don't give a shit about you. And then I was like, oh, I'm just better than you. Like, I don't have to. But hey, guys, if you guys have enjoyed this podcast, if you've enjoyed this episode, any of the shorts that we do, anything like that, do me a favor, will you? Go to YouTube and make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit the bell for notifications. And you know what? Why don't you drop a comment in the section there and just let us know what you think? Do you have a question or some feedback for us? Do you just want to say like, hey, Craig, I like your hair down. I like it up. Ben, you look fat in that polo. Whatever it is, leave a comment in the section. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube, and we'll talk to you guys later. Yeah, so I punched Chad Barber in the head, and he fucking, fell down bleeding. And then after that, no more bullying. Because they're like, yeah, did you see that? Like, Ben punched Chad, fucking start bleeding. That's how hard he hit him, right?
It takes once.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think there was ever another fight that I was like, I wanted to happen. Almost every other one was either like, hey, we're getting into a fight, or all of a sudden like, oh, we're in a fight right now, which is always a surprise.
Yeah. After my brother and I fought after watching Fight Club, we also then went down the rabbit hole of trying to find some place to train. And he found this jiu-jitsu guy in Ogden, Utah. His name is Rich Layton. And I'm sitting here as we're talking about all of these things. Have we talked about this already on the podcast?
I'm not gonna like.
It feels very.
You said Rich Layton,
familiar,
and
right?
I was like, God, that sounds familiar.
Yeah,
I can't remember if maybe you and I have had this conversation or if we have talked about it.
Okay,
but let's continue to dive. Let's pull some layers back of this onion, right? This parfait, and
literally the other day on the other podcast with Steph, I had this massive, beautiful epiphany moment where it was like I stopped shaming myself for repeating myself on podcasts because I recognized that it wasn't that big of a deal. And somehow I've managed to recreate the exact scenario where I am repeating myself over and over and over again. Anyway, it was in my early 20s, and I started going to jiu-jitsu with my brother. And as soon as I found jiu-jitsu, it just changed everything for me because it started to give me the outlet that I needed for all of that anger and all of that stuff. And I loved it. I just loved everything about it. I loved being able to, the beauty of it is you get to push and try, and like you get to basically fight real hard, but in a semi-safe way.
Semi-safe, yeah.
Right. And that was really, really wonderful.
Yeah.
And so I just started going as much as I could. I mean, I trained jiu-jitsu a ton for the first several years. And that was where a big, huge chunk of just like the base of my, not just jiu-jitsu knowledge, but truthfully just like my love for it. And within that like first 5 years, I trained as much as I could all the time. We had a huge facility that was just really an empty warehouse. And it was like, I mean, it was ginormous. And we were just using a portion of it. So it was like this huge section of mats. There was a cage in there that Rich had. So we got to fight and train in the cage. And the majority of it was all jiu-jitsu based stuff. But then we would also cross-train into stand-up and all these other kind of things.
Yeah.
And Jeremy Horn, who's a UFC fighter, he would come up and train because he had a place down in Salt Lake. And so he was up there training, I think once a week. He would teach like on Thursdays. And then Court McGee, who's also a UFC fighter, because Court's from Utah.
Okay.
And so at the same time, Court's a few years younger than I am. And at the time, he was really heavily into wrestling because that's where his like base comes from. So I was training with all of these guys, and there was a real good up and coming fight promoter in Salt Lake at the time. I think it was called U.S.A. or something. Ultimate Combat Experience was the name of the show, and it was on TV, like local cable stuff,
Spike
kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And
Spike TV.
so there was a lot of those guys that were fighting in that as well. So there was this little community of Jiu-Jitsu and MMA, and it was so much fun. Like, it was just so much fun. It's exactly what I needed at that stage. I was in my early 20s. I had my 2 girls. It was with my first marriage, and it was a great outlet. And then the very first time I fought, it was the thing where Rich had some connection with the fight promoter up in Washington State. So we got to fly up to Tacoma and fight in the Tacoma Dome, which was like,
that's cool.
This huge
venue. Like, yeah.
There were, probably over 1,000 people. And that was so crazy. Like, it was such a neat experience.
Did you win?
I did. I won my first fight.
There you go.
I knocked the guy out in the first round.
Hell yeah.
It was very cool.
Right?
Nathan,
were you like...
It was so weird. Yeah, it was nuts because it was like the fight starts and I was very, very nervous, like super nervous. And my base was jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
So I knew that, like, at any given point, if we go to the ground, I had 0 issues. Like, I was so...
You're like, that's what I kind of want to happen here.
Yeah, right. But I also, I also wanted to fight. I also wanted to... So we stood up and just started throwing, and it was like 2.5 minutes in, and I just caught him with this fucking right hand, and he just goes down, and I'm like watching him. I put him in the face.
In the face,
yeah,
like on the chin. Yeah, hit the button.
Yeah, and it was so crazy because I had never had that. I could never knocked anybody out before.
Oh, yeah.
And just to watch it happen and then just be like, oh. And then I like hurried up and kept going after him for a minute, but then the ref stops and everything like that. That was the first fight. So that was really, really cool experience to kind of have that. And then 6 months later, 8 months later, it could have been a year later, I don't really remember the time frame, I went back and fought a second time in like the Dome of Destruction 2. That was the name of the event. And this time I did not win. This time it was, in the second round, the guy was on top of me and just pounding away at my face. And I could hear the ref telling me I needed to do stuff. I could hear all of those things. And I'm just like, it's not going to happen, ref. Yeah. It's just not going to happen. You're going to stop this at some point.
Right.
And he did. So it was a ref stoppage and everything like that. But that was also a really impactful experience for me, to be able to, like, the entire time I was really cognitive. I was really aware, even though this guy was like beating the shit out of me. My whole face swelled up afterwards. So like everything was just, I remember laying in bed at the hotel room because I was up there by myself. My wife at the time, she didn't come with us because of the kids and everything. So there were all the guys from
the team and all that.
And everything that were up there. But I just remember laying in bed and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't breathe. My nose is so swollen. My face is just like,
eyes are all swollen. It's just
horrible.
like, you're like, I'm so miserable.
Such a nightmare.
Yeah.
I was in so much just like pain and discomfort, but it was really cool to experience it because I hadn't ever been beaten that hard before. So I never really knew not just what that experience would feel like, but it turned out I had a chin that could survive, right? He never rocked me. I was never out. I never saw stars or anything like that. So that was a cool experience, but that was it. That was my 2 big experiences ever fighting.
Have you ever been knocked out?
Not from
a punch?
Not from a punch or
a kick or something?
Yeah, nothing like that. Yeah.
I've also never been knocked out by a punch or a kick or anything like that. I have been choked out in by myself, just being stupid.
Hey, what you do by yourself is...
no, that would be... anyways, I had a guy when I was in the Marines choke me out and I was trying to get it. And then I remember like he had a rear naked and I had like reached up and I was like, yeah. And I, in my brain, had pulled this down and got it off. And then my eyes opened and they were all over me. Like, are you okay? And I was like, what's going on? Right. Like that was what happened in time. But yeah, I've been punched in the face. I don't know, 30, 40 times, like different, like times like that. And, I don't think I bet you the ratio of times I've punched someone in the face to been punched in the face is pretty steep. I have probably only punched somebody in the face like maybe 5 times.
Yeah.
Like it's just not. I remember the first time I punched someone like right in the chin, like just a wham, got them just like that, and they down out, and I was like, ow, like it hurts your fingers, right? That like right here, I was like, ow, I don't like. Yeah, stop that. Like I'm just gonna slap people from now on because that hurt. I don't know, or I think I tried to backhand somebody after that because I was like, well, I don't want to do that anymore, and I was like, oh, that's not any better.
Yeah.
Like it still hurts my knuckles, but. And then I push kick. That's my favorite. A teep.
The push kick. Yeah,
dude.
yeah.
The teep, the fat man kick. That is. We teach that in the Marine Corps martial arts program. We call it a push kick and a teep, and it's my favorite. It's hands down, besides a headbutt, the best way to start a fight.
It's very effective.
Very effective.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Almost
super great.
Especially if like they're not quite like the secret to it is, well, the secret to any good fight or to win a fight is to start the fight before they're ready, right? If you do that, good chance you're going to win. My dad taught me that. He's like, yeah, he's like, right when you think there's about to be a fight, start fighting.
Right.
He's like, don't let them swing first. He's like, it's always worse.
Yeah.
But I love that, like opening, boom, big push kick. They normally stumble to the ground, and then you can just hit them a couple times and game
I never
over.
really put myself in experiences like throughout my life. I never really put myself in places where I was going to be in a fight or get in a fight. I didn't really hang out with, guys that were violent and things like that. And the times that I would kind of encounter it at bars or things like that. Like I was a bartender for a while, and there were always fights there at times. And it always seemed, it just was like strange to me. I kind of felt like, because there's nothing good that comes from it.
No.
There's literally nothing good that comes from it. Then I can never think of a reason other than straight up survival for, to fight anything or to hit anybody or to do anything like that. And that's why jiu-jitsu is so great, right?
Yep.
Because you don't have to use anything to just finish the problem. The problem is easily solved by just controlling somebody with jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
So
I agree. I cannot really think of any time, like I said, that I've been like, I'm going to fight this guy, right? This is going to be great. For me, it's always been, especially like I had a bunch of guys, there's a bunch of Marines who are drinking and we're dumb. Like I'll own that. Any of my Marine friends, like we can all agree, this is the facts, right? We're dumb. It's violence. Like, what else are we going to do? We're going to get drunk and we're going to fight each other. Or we're going to get drunk and we're going to go fight somebody else. And we're going to do that together, right? I wish I had a nickel. I would say after the age of 18, 80% of the fights that I have been in where like there's been a swing, a push, some kind of physical altercation has been somebody else starting it. And it's like, well, that's my boy. Like, I'm going to come in here and help them. Or I've had people come over and be like, hey, we're going to go fight those guys. And I was like, I don't want to. And they're like, well, we're going to go do it. And we're going to need you to show up. And I'm like, all right, well, let's go do this. And I don't like, I'm not a swinger or anything like that because there's just a likelihood I'm going to swing on you and throw my back out, right? Like I'm going to get my hands on you and I'm going to take you to the ground and then I'm going to get on top and then I'm going to just pound on you for a minute. That's really
I've done a bunch of like sparring and boxing and everything like that over the years. And I really enjoy that. Like I love putting pads on and putting mouth guards in, and I really like that a lot. I'm a big fan of stand-up sparring and everything like that.
Yeah.
And like that is something that I want to do more of because I just really enjoy it. I like the it's kind of, it's just stand-up, right? It's the games. It's the same thing as jiu-jitsu where you've just got to try to figure out how to, stop this guy from hurting you and make sure that you hurt him. And so I'm a big fan of that. There was a time when I was a cop, because I worked on this crew where the three of us were all real close to age. So we were all really kind of in that same, a lot of testosterone, a lot of, but we were also really like good, close friends outside of work as well. And it was graveyards one night. And so we put on boxing gloves and went into like the empty office space that was in the PD. And because we wanted to, one of the things that we always wanted to kind of like find out and test out too is because you don't get a lot of training in all of your gear, in your uniform, and, you know, all the training that you ever go through is oftentimes in PT gear, right? And so we kind of wanted to see what it was like to go through the process of some stand-up training and boxing in all of our shit.
Okay.
So we just did it.
Like with your like belts on and like your...
Yeah, we're just in uniform.
Okay.
Just like,
okay.
I mean, it's
You're not in like SWAT gear.
No.
You're not in a bomb suit going like, high kick.
Let's see what happens. No, no, but we were on duty. So it was while we were working. So we were literally just in what we were wearing, right? But it's like 3 a.m. And Sergeant was definitely not in the office at the time. And so we
probably not, right? You're
no,
like
definitely not.
Definitely not.
Yeah, he's not condoning this.
Yeah. Where's this or not? Not here.
Yeah. And it was me and my other friend. His name's Jason. So we put on these boxing gloves and we just start throwing punches at each other. And it was a lot. I had a lot of fun with it, and it was interesting too because you learn more about all of your stuff. And one of the things that I learned from that experience was, because you've got your radio, right? You've got the microphone that comes off of your radio.
Yep.
And so that gets positioned in a bunch of different places, and kind of however you choose to wear it is kind of however you want to wear it. And at the time I was wearing it over my shoulder, and I would clip it on my shirt because they got a little clippy on it. And very quickly that thing just goes flying around.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the microphone becomes this thing that just flings around. So since then I put a safety pin up on my shirt. So all of my shirts had a safety pin that I would tuck in, and then I would click that microphone onto the safety pin. So then that way that mic would never go anywhere.
There you go.
So there's some benefit to it, right?
Yeah. I mean, listen,
Totally worthwhile.
we used to do that stuff all the time. Like you could tell somebody who had like really put some time and effort, because with like for us in the Marines, like you'd have all your gear and then you'd like, all right. And you'd be like, well, I don't want these straps all hanging loose. So you'd roll them up and put some electrical tape on them, tuck them in and all this stuff. But you do that, and then like the next, you're like, oh, this isn't fucking right? And then you have to adjust it. So you have to keep going through and like figuring out how to do things, where you want things tight, where you want things loose, so you could function in your gear.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you're not going to know really until you've got it on and you're trying to function, right? So then you're like, the worst part is if you get it wrong, and then you're like, I've had a flight vest just riding up my ass for 8 hours. You're like, this is the worst thing in the world. Can't wait till I get back and get this thing adjusted, because it's terrible.
That whole game of like, I created so many different things, because that was one thing that they kind of didn't, really explain when you were a police officer, is you set up everything the way that you want to set it up, right?
Yep.
So yeah, you have to follow some protocols and some policy and things like that in regards to the things that you're required to carry, or the things that you can and cannot carry. But outside of that, you kind of get to set everything up the way that you want it. You get to set up your vehicle the way that you want it. You get to set up your belt, everything, right? So I just would, and I loved that aspect of it. Like, it was totally taking me back to the day when I was a little kid, and I would ride around town on my bicycle over to my buddy's house with all my toy guns, tacked, stuck everywhere.
But now they're real.
Exactly. And so I had everything structured in such a way where the whole idea was, at any given point, no matter what, I could access a knife, I could access a gun, I could access everything that I needed to. Do you know what I mean? And not only that, but like same thing in my vehicle, where my vehicle was set up in such a way too. So no matter if I was on this side of the vehicle, I had ammo. If I was on that side of the vehicle, I had ammo. If I was, all these kind of different things. And I mean, that like is the ADHD part of me that is just like, oh my God, I'm so excited to get to do all of those
tinker
little
with
things.
all this.
Yeah. And just get it to the point where it's like this well-oiled machine. And as soon as something goes wrong, or like, you're like, well, you've got new vests, so you got to try on this new vest. And I'm like, fuck that. Because my other vest
my
was
other
like
perfect,
molded to me.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
That was, so we would set up our helicopters, like when we flew, like everybody has their own way of doing things. And we teach them the base, like there's a unique way to roll up your ICS cable. So your intercommunication system, internal communication system. In order for me to hear and talk to you, we have wires that are 50 feet long, but you roll them up a certain way so they don't get twisted and all that. So you learn these basics. But a lot of those things, like, oh, you have your flight bag. Well, I have a gunner's belt and a gunner's belt extension. My gunner's belt extension is also the shoulder strap for my bag, right? So I do that. What pockets go where, right? Like, so you have all the stuff that you can access. And for us, part of it is it always going to be there? If I am upside down in the dark, can't see, can't hear, can't see or taste or feel, if I can get to this bag, can I find this piece of equipment? Yes. Do I always have I always carried extra glow sticks. We always had extra, like if we were overseas, I always had extra mags, extra blades. Like we always kept a blade on us. And people are like, well, what's that for? I was like, man, entanglement. Like helicopters crash and it's normally not the crash that kills the crew. It's if it's in water, they can't get out because they're entangled. So like, yeah, keep some blades on you, right? Like, and then you'd have this is my working blade. This is the blade I use for...
Right, this is my everyday knife.
My everyday, I'm going to cut up my hot dog and I'm going to pry open that ammo can. And this is I only use this if I have to. It's super sharp, don't touch it knife.
Yeah.
Right? Like I need this to cut through anything I try to cut through when I try to cut through it. And then it was funny because we would have, on your flight vest, you were allowed extra... I can't remember if it was it was like 1 or 2 pounds or 3 pounds or so of extra gear. And it could be anything. And mine was candy bars. I just filled mine with extra candy bars. And people would be like, you just got extra candy bars? I'm like, listen, I got a flight bag. Like I've got a dozen magazines in there. I got a dozen blades. I got snacks and all that stuff. I was like, but if push come to shove and it's just me and I'm somewhere that I'm not supposed to be, I want more food. Like we're in the desert. There's not a lot of sustenance just laying around, right? I can't swing by the grocery store and pick up something to eat on my way to get found. So yeah, I want some candy. So it was Snickers bars. I put a lot of Snickers bars in there.
That's great, dude.
Yeah. So Snickers bars, even like water. Somebody was like, do you want extra water? I was like, fuck water. Water's for the weak. I was like, water sucks. I was like, no, man, I want a candy bar. Like, I'm not going to sit there and drink like my little thing. Because if you drink like this much water, you're like, oh, I'm better. No, I'm just more thirsty.
Yeah.
But if I had a candy bar, I'd be like sitting there like, well, I'm in a predicament. Right. But no, I like setting all that stuff up because it makes you efficiency. It's all about building efficiency in your bubble. Right? Your space, your vehicle, your helicopter, your whatever. Like, this is my bubble.
Yeah.
And it's my bubbles. My bubbles. And, right?
It's all the bubbles.
It's all the bubbles, man. Little Finding Nemo bubbles. But you got to get your bubble set up right. You know, that's, I think you and I have talked about this. Jamie laughs at me because especially when we started dating, I was in the Marine Corps and she obviously had never even dated a Marine or anything like that, or really anybody in the service. And there were ways that I did things. And I referred to it as the method of my madness. Like there's a reason why these things are done in this order, in this way, because first of all, that's the way to do them. But second of all, this is the most efficient way to do these kind of things. And so she actually got me cups that were engraved. They're my Ben Tim cups, and they say method to my madness.
Yeah.
So
I remember you mentioning that.
Yeah. But yeah, I think to take it all back, I agree that violence isn't something that's probably necessary. And I'll be honest, I'm actually going to take that back. I don't think violence is necessary until you need it, right? Like in this day and age where the power grid's up, the internet's working, there's food on the shelves, and like everything that we would need, we're fine. If 2 of those 3 systems collapses, and it goes to some kind of system where you're like, yeah, like there is no system, then you need violence again. Like I wish you didn't. I really hope that we can resolve all those issues without violence. But at the end of the day, if it was between me trying to get my kids some sustenance or water or something that they need, and somebody trying to stop me from doing that, and my violence is better than theirs, that's just the way the cookie crumbled.
Yeah.
I used to say this when I was working out a lot, is I believe that strength training is really important because it allows you to inflict your will upon the world in the way of moving time or things through time and space, right? So a weak person struggles to move things, objects through time and space. if you're stronger, it is easier to move things through time and space. And as somebody who participates in martial arts and strength training, it gives me the ability to inflict my will upon the world. And whether that be getting through a door that is not opening, or helping someone out of a burning vehicle, or stopping someone from doing something to me and mine, that's what it is. It's my ability to inflict my will on the world.
How do you feel like jiu-jitsu has changed you?
Ooh, that's a solid question. I mean, it definitely has, in the last few years since finding jiu-jitsu specifically, it's definitely become an outlet for me. I know that there's all these things where people talk about like it quiets the mind, like, and I agree. Like, if someone's trying to murder you, like, I'm not thinking about like my wife's car needs a new engine while you're trying to choke me, right? If someone's trying to rip my arm off, I'm not thinking about what bills need to get paid right now, right? So it really does give you the opportunity to forget of all the external and internal that is not necessarily what is important at that moment. And it gives you that singular thing to think about and focus on. And for that, I love it. I love that ability. When we're doing jiu-jitsu, the only thing I'm thinking about is you and me doing jiu-jitsu. Occasionally, like, you're joking or there's some things going on or whatever. Like, if you and me are rolling, somebody's rolling, and we're kind of having a laugh while they're doing something, whatever, like, that's fine. Like, we're still having a good time, but that's what we're thinking about. But yeah, I don't stress about all that other stuff when I'm in the middle of somebody, trying to get somebody off my back. Like, it's just not a concern at that part. Like, I'm Maslow's hierarchy of needs, breathing, top, right? It's on the top. So, I mean, that's the way that I think about it. What about you?
I mean, there's so many ways. I think, it's one of the things that, especially since I came back to it in a real solid way, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Prior to that, it was, so I did all that training in my early 20s. And then when I moved from that area of Utah, we moved out to Grantsville. Then it was a buddy of mine had mats in his basement. So I was going over there and teaching everybody stuff so that I would have other guys to train with. And then eventually somebody opened up a school, which was great because that then gave us a place to train instead of somebody's basement. And then once I got into law enforcement, I would train with guys as much as I could, like after, work. And there was always people that had some jiu-jitsu. And then, like I said, about 5 or 6 years ago, I started going back real dedicated on a weekly basis, multiple times a week. And ever since then, not only has my, obviously it's the same thing where my jiu-jitsu has gotten way, way, way better and way more deep, I think, like the ability to move past submissions and move into this different place with it. But ever since I've come to Tennessee and started, it has opened up so many different avenues to where it's not, I don't look at it as I'm going to practice jiu-jitsu. I really look at it from that perspective of like the martial art perspective of it, where it's this practice for life. It's this deeper meaning and understanding for me of, it's just a reflection of life. It's just me facing myself over and over and over and over and over again. It's me dealing with my shit over and over and over and over again. Because more and more I learned, I mean, it was just literally from experience of like everything that I was dealing with off of the mat outside of jiu-jitsu was the same stuff that would get me caught up in jiu-jitsu, that would get me, stuck, would get me hung up. And the more I was resisting and stressing about things outside of it, and the more difficult life was, the more difficult time I was having on the mat. The easier things were in life, the easier I would have on the mat. And so I really have just started to look at it as this beautiful reflection of what life is, and seeing the deeper understanding of it. And then recently it was that first roll that we had, New Year's Day. And it was like that too, just took me to a different place where, because I was trying to figure out how to keep jiu-jitsu in my life. I had to take all that time off to heal. And I was trying to figure out how to keep, going to jiu-jitsu because it is such an important part for me. And now I see it almost as a completely different thing as well, where it's way less about the experience of what it's reflecting for me in my life and how it's, how I'm seeing things parallel back and forth between life and between jiu-jitsu and the mat and everything like that. And now it's just an opportunity to show up and be of service to the people that are there.
Yeah.
Just really go there specifically with that intent and purpose of just service. I'm just there to serve the other person through whatever means that is for them, however that looks, whether it's teaching, whether it's, filling a void in the, because there's people that show up and they want to roll because they're angry, because they're mad, because they're processing things. It's just all of these kind of different reasons why people come to it and why they experience it.
Hey, everybody, if you've enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, or if you're brand new to this podcast or our collection of super fun content, do me a favor, right? Anywhere you guys listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you guys listen to those, go check it out, subscribe, right? Leave a comment, hit us or give us a review. Preferably 5 stars. That would be great, right? Mucho, thank you. And you know what? Let us know what you guys are thinking. Maybe check out YouTube, and we'll see you guys later.
And now it's just my opportunity to really just show up and be of service to whoever I'm sitting across from, whoever I'm rolling with, and whatever it is that they need in that moment. And sometimes it's hard for them to articulate or understand. And it's hard for me to understand sometimes too, but it's just like, that's the place that I'm at with it now, where it's way less about, I'm not concerned about, like, quote unquote, getting better at jiu-jitsu, right?
I mean, you're pretty fucking good at it now.
I'm pretty good at it now.
I would totally, like, for our listeners, Craig's pretty good at jiu-jitsu. Definitely one of the hardest roles that I have at any given moment.
I've got a unique set of skills.
You do.
Life set me up for jiu-jitsu in a real beautiful way.
It's really hard. Like, I'm not going to lie. I don't know anybody else who rolls like you.
Yeah.
I say this, and I tell this to people all the time. It's like rolling with really angry water, because you flow in the way that you move is very fluid, and it's not very, like, you really do. Like, you're like the airbender with jiu-jitsu almost. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, you just take what is going on and you just move it around, and then you're choking someone and you're like, how the hell did this happen, right? And you move really well, and then all of a sudden you're like, damn it, this is not what I wanted to happen. And you're just like, haha. And yeah, you're really hard to do jiu-jitsu. It's I feel very not flowy when I do jiu-jitsu with you. I feel like just a rock. Just
yeah. I think a lot about how to help you with jiu-jitsu.
Oh.
Because like, I see your game, right? Like, that's the other thing too, is like, I've done it long enough that, you see everybody's game in jiu-jitsu and their path and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish and where they're heading and all these kind of different things. And everybody gets, there's just these levels to the game and the experience of it. And it's very much it's kind of a linear thing, but it's, I'm constantly trying to, again, it's like, how can I serve Ben in jiu-jitsu? How can I help Ben become the greatest for him? How can I help him bring forth his best jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
I want him to see the absolute best jiu-jitsu that he's ever seen before come through him. So then it's like, how do I help him get to that space? And sometimes that looks like fucking you up. Sometimes that looks like, do you know what I mean? It's all these kind of different things, but that's the part that I really enjoy, is I want to see people just get to the spot with it where they excel with their jiu-jitsu. Because that's the other thing too, is there comes a point, and it's usually purple and beyond, where it's, you recognize that you're taking everything and making it your own.
Yep.
So you're not learning techniques anymore. I mean, you still learn techniques, of course, right? but you're just taking all the things that you're learning and you're running it through your filters and through your system and creating your jiu-jitsu with it. And that's the part that's really exciting for me when people get to that spot, is when they start to create their jiu-jitsu and how they use it and how they work with it. And like, you have Ben jiu-jitsu, like it's very clear what Ben's jiu-jitsu is. And I also see where you like get stuck in Ben's jiu-jitsu. And it's like, how can I help Ben see outside of his jiu-jitsu so that his growth continues to kind of expand and his jiu-jitsu goes to the next level? Because it's the same old thing where we get stuck in our own, we get in our own way. And sometimes it's really, really difficult to see outside of that. And that's the beauty, like I was saying earlier, where it's just this beautiful reflection of what life is, right? You'll go to jiu-jitsu and you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, expecting a different result. And yet you get the same result time and time again. And when you can look outside of that, and when you can start to see kind of like, okay, I keep going left. If I keep going left, it's going to result
I know what's going to happen.
You know what's going to happen. And sometimes that's great, right? Sometimes you need to know what's going to happen in jiu-jitsu, but start going right every now and then, and not even like left or right. Start going up, start going down, start going in different directions and angles than you could possibly imagine. And then that's where you start to find the pieces of your jiu-jitsu that you can grow and build upon. And so I'm always kind of looking at that lens of it too, where like there's a handful of guys at the at Athens Jiu-Jitsu now where it's like, I'm excited to watch their jiu-jitsu evolve, because that's when it gets like really, really fun. Like when you roll with somebody who is in that evolutionary state of their jiu-jitsu, is just really,
it's progressing almost every day, because they're past the, it's like that blue belt, like kind of like senior white belt, blue belt, like early purple belt. Like when you watch them and you're like, they've gone through the instructional, they understand all these things, but then they can tweak. They make those just minute little shifts in things. And now like the philosophy, the idea, the concept of what they're doing is really processing. And you can watch them like, oh, I'm going to lean this way and I'm going to loosen this. Like I was talking about this morning, talking about going from like back to armbar, right? So like, hey, going from back control to an armbar. And I was like, it was really hard for me for a very long time because I wanted to pull everything in tight, but then I couldn't create enough room for me to get my leg and to put myself in that position. And I kept limiting my mobility because I was trying to control too much. And it wasn't until this morning where I was like, if I can keep this tight here, but extend, that creates the room for me to, lean, throw my leg over. And I like, literally, I was like, oh. And I was like, hey, can we do that again? And then like, what do you mean? I was like, let me just go back to that spot. Don't let me do this. And they're like, all right. And I was able to do it again. And I was like, okay. But when you can watch that person, it's clicking for them and they're like, okay. And that I talk a lot about is like the ideas. It's not the moves itself, but it's the theories of operation and the principles of how the human body moves.
Yeah, it's body mechanics.
Body mechanics, right?
As soon as you recognize how bodies move and you can manipulate, I mean, that's what I love about, you've got to teach the foundational structure of like, this is how we do arm bars, this is how we do triangles, so that people have something to build upon. But then it's like, once that person understands how an arm bar works from any position, because they just understand how the arm bends and moves, then it gets exciting.
Yeah, because now there's thousands of arm bars, right? You're like, it's not even like, oh, is that an arm bar? I mean, yeah. I pinned the shoulder, like I had two immobile spots and one mobile spot.
Right.
And I applied pressure to one of those and I got an arm bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, I agree. I think that's super fun. I love watching. It's also really fun to watch as somebody who's on this side. I say that as myself, but on this side of it, watching the young guys. So this morning we had Will and Austin, who are two newer morning guys with us, and they've been training for like 3 months. Austin is, I think did you meet Austin?
I might have.
Bigger guy.
Yeah.
He's like 6'1", 6'2", probably like 230. Like he's a stronger individual. Will is a little younger, not as big. Still a bigger guy, but not as strong. But they've been doing it for like 3 months now. And we have Paul, who's got 9 months in as a, kind of new white belt, mornings only, no gi only. And he's like, yeah, 4 months ago, Paul was like, man, I suck. I was like, yeah, but like you're progressing at the same time as everybody else. So it's going to be hard for you to see that improvement. Wait till new guys come in. And then as soon as Austin and Will came in, he's like, I'm crushing these guys. I was like, yeah, man, I told you. Right. And now Will and Austin are over here like, everybody beats me up. I'm like, well, yeah, you're the youngest guy here. Like no one else is, as your jiu-jitsu is getting better, which it is, so is everyone else's. Right. So it's really hard to compare yourself. Like we're all on the same train, but I got on the train before you did. So I've got more time on this train.
Yeah.
I'll get off before you, and then at some point someone's getting on after you. You'll be fine with those people,
Yeah. We had one of our posts on social, that Tom Hanks clip from Captain Phillips.
Yeah.
That did real good on social. There was a comment on there that really stuck out to me because the post is all about, the old man and being sore and coming home and being all beat up from jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. And this guy commented on there. It was some guy that was, he commented that he was like in his 40s and he had been doing jiu-jitsu for a while and he never comes home that way. And he had awareness, like the comment was like, he trains with people that don't hurt him.
I mean, that's great.
And I was like, suddenly my brain was just like, hold on a minute. I think I've been doing jiu-jitsu wrong my whole life.
Yeah, right. Right.
The reality is I think there's definitely a way to do it where we're not hurting each other, where we're not inflicting pain on each other. And there's a part of my brain that can't grasp that yet, like can't really put those pieces together because of all the programming. And it's kind of the stuff that we've been talking about with like violence and masculinity. And like, it just is kind of the nature of the beast. And it just kind of comes with it, right? Where you're going to do jiu-jitsu and you're going to get hurt. And it's not like we're out to hurt each other, but it just kind of happens. And I'm like, what if there was a way to do it where that wasn't the case? What if there was a way to do it where nobody got hurt and it wasn't even like by accident?
Yeah.
It was just set up and structured in such a way where, the goal, and I know the goal isn't to hurt people, but like that wasn't a byproduct of the experience. We could still somehow train, get good, have all the benefits that we love from jiu-jitsu. All of those things are taking place. We're just removing that component of physical injury and pain from the equation. And I'm like, I think that's possible. Like I shouldn't say I think, I have to believe that that's possible. I have to entertain the idea that there's a reality that exists where that's possible. And that is totally something that can be doable. And I can't imagine it. So I'm going to start getting really curious about it. And it's kind of what I've done, because now I'm not going to ever put myself in a position where I get hurt. And it's not like, not only where I get hurt, but as soon as I feel pain with something, I'm just done. I just tap. I'm not concerned, even if it's not a submission. Yeah. Even if it's not something that
there's no reason to ride that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no, and it's the whole thing with yoga too, where it's like you do yoga and you get into yoga positions and you're in the all the different things, and you do it until sensation. You do it right up into the spot where you feel the muscle, you feel the experience, but you never push past that limit where you're hurting yourself. And so that's really what I'm going to start doing with my jiu-jitsu and when I'm rolling and training with people. But it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard to do because, first and foremost, not everybody's doing it, right? Correct. It's like I'm the only one that has that mentality at this point with the people that I'm rolling with. A lot of people are trying to hurt me. And
people, I mean, as much, and I agree, I don't think that people are out trying to hurt you, but there's a unspoken pecking order, and people are always trying to like edge somebody out and just get a little higher on that hill. Yeah, yeah. Right? It's that like non-spoken, competitive, like king of the hill, like, all right, well, like can I continuously knock that guy down a peg so I can be on that peg, right? But this guy can knock me down a peg. Like, where's everybody kind of fall in that stack ranking, right? So I think it's not that people are trying to hurt you, but people are trying to elevate their stack ranking a little bit in that. I also believe that there's probably a place where everybody could train in jiu-jitsu and no one gets hurt. I don't know if that if that reality creates the best progression for jiu-jitsu, because
it's kind of hard to imagine, right?
Yeah. So like, okay, so let's talk about somebody real quick, right? I'm going to talk about a couple years ago, we had some of our guys from the gym signed up for a AGF competition, and they were like, we're going to go do this. They were all in the same weight class, in the same like weight class, same age category, same belt level, right? They're all senior white belts basically, and they're all going to go do this jiu-jitsu competition. And there was a guy who was in that jiu-jitsu competition who smoke checked every single one of them. And part of that was, I'm not sure if that level of intensity, if they had really felt that level of intensity. Like they had what we considered like gym intensity, right? Like, yeah, we were rolling and like getting smoked and like all that stuff happens. And then they got competitive. And that's where like somebody takes that up another notch. And they're like, oh, this will just be like when we're in the gym. And it's not.
No.
Right? Like competitive jiu-jitsu is
competition is way different.
Yeah. That's why I'm retired from competitive jiu-jitsu. I don't have any reason to prove myself in any way, shape, or form. I say that, and then I'm like, man.
I know, dude. There's going to come
hard.
a time. I feel like you and me have I would love to go compete with you. I would love to go to a competition with you. No, that would be awesome.
That would be awesome.
Tag team jiu-jitsu would be fucking incredible.
Right? The only time you have to have
Do they have that? Is that
I don't
a thing?
know, but we could totally come up with that.
We totally need to create it,
yeah,
right?
Like
so
you have to
create
you could
two
only
teams of 4.
2 teams of 4?
Okay, so you've got 2 teams of 4. And the whole thing is like, as soon as that person taps, that's like them tapping in somebody else. So the idea is you don't want to tap because the team with the most players left wins.
Okay.
So if we've got 2 teams of 4, 2 guys enter and they start rolling, right? 2 men enter, but they start rolling. And let's say guy 1 taps guy 2.
Okay.
So now guy 2's teammate comes in.
Guy 2
and
of 2.
immediately starts attacking the guy that just submitted his partner, right?
Yeah.
So that's the tap in. That's the tag, is when you tap. But you don't want to tap. So it's not like I'm tapping to get another guy into the ring. I'm fighting. I'm doing everything I can.
So it's just a war of attrition at that point.
Right.
Because you've got 4 and 4, and if my one guy can go through all 4 of your guys,
you win.
My team wins.
Right.
But if it takes all 4 of my guys and all 4 of your guys, the last one to tap, hey, this team won because they were the last man standing.
I think we need to do this on a Saturday.
See, I mean, this is different than what I was thinking. I was thinking I like this idea.
That's a great idea.
I was thinking more like if it was a tag team, so 2 on 2.
Okay.
2 people going, and you can't tap out of a submission. You can't tag someone out. If somebody is trying to submit you, you cannot tag out of a submission. You have to be in a dominant position to tag your partner in. So if I'm in top mount or side control, or I guess it would be hard with leg entanglements because what's the dominant in that, right?
There's a lot of 50-50 experiences.
Yeah. So maybe that's a neutral, right? So like if you're closed guard, if I'm on my back, but I've got you in closed guard, that's kind of a neutral position, right? But if I was on top mount, or if you're on mount and I'm on bottom, I can't tag out of that spot. I don't know. It'd be fun to like create some rules for.
I think we just go straight submission.
Straight submission.
So the whole idea is it's 2 teams of 4 guys, or whoever, right? It doesn't have to be guys. 2 teams of 4 people.
Could be 8 guys,
right? So you've got, and then the whole goal is you got to be the last team standing.
It's like flip cup,
right?
It's like flip cup for jiu-jitsu.
What's flip cup?
That's where you have to like flip. You basically, I start flipping my cup, and when my cup lands the right way, then it's your turn, and you keep going. But it's a domino effect of like the fastest we can get this done.
Yeah.
And
so the fastest, like whoever, because again, right, by tapping to that submission,
the next guy comes.
You're
Do you have to
tagging in
start
your
back in that
teammate.
position?
No,
So
it's
you
just immediate.
Right back into ground.
So as soon as I choke you, I know that as soon as I choke you and you tap,
This guy's coming.
I know that you're getting off Like you're rolling off to the side. I'm pushing you off to the side because now I'm fighting the guy that's coming next. And
So
if I can submit that guy, then I got to fight the next guy and I got to fight the next guy. But if I only get through 2 of them and then that guy submits me, he's getting a fresh guy from my team coming in. There's something here.
That could be a really cool process.
I think we need to play around
It
with
would be
this
interesting
on
to
like
watch the strategy of like, if you've got...
because you got to, who you putting in.
Yeah. Do you put your best guy in first to try and wear through as many people as possible? But
Or
like
do
if
you
they
save
leave
him
there,
until the
yeah,
very
just save
end,
him for
right?
the very end.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's where it's going to get. It's going to get to strategy at that point. Where, because like obviously I could just roll through 4 people super easy, right?
Yeah.
But
And then it doesn't matter who's on your team. But at the same time, if there's you and the person who's, if you start and the person who's on the last place to go is the least experienced person and they're the inverse, right? Or,
This sounds really
this could be
cool.
really fun.
Yeah, I think we just came up with tag team jiu-jitsu.
I mean,
It's probably already out there somewhere.
It probably is.
They got car jiu-jitsu,
jiu-jitsu,
right?
yeah.
There's all sorts of different things.
the car jiu-jitsu stuff's crazy.
I love it.
Toyota just sponsored.
We should get one for the gym.
Dude,
let's get a shitty car.
Let's get a shitty
that we
Toyota
can just
like
park
Prius.
off to the side there, and we can do a car jiu-jitsu at the gym.
I mean, just bring the Charger by, and we'll just do it in the Charger.
have to do it in the van.
We'll do it. There's basically mat space in the back. That's
right.
Right? You're like, I don't know what's going on in that van. There's a couple guys rolling around and they're trying to hurt each other. Yeah, don't look in the window. That's a little different. That's the wrong van. Wrong
How
van.
come they've got all those cameras set up? Why are they recording?
Somebody just took their shirt. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, I think that would be super fun.
I wanted to talk to you about, because we had a conversation the other night where we were talking about belts.
Okay.
And I know that it's the thing in jiu-jitsu right now where some places are doing away with belts and they're doing away with all of it. And I kind of really wanted to get your take on it. I think it's a good thing. I mean, but I also come from, when I started jiu-jitsu, belts weren't even something that we thought about, or it wasn't and you didn't get belts from
You were just doing
no-gi.
it you were just training to train.
Yeah, we were just doing jiu-jitsu to do jiu-jitsu, right? And it's like you just simply knew who was better than you because they were better than you. And and because I never did any gi jiu-jitsu at any given point, like ever, right? The idea of belts weren't a big deal to me. They weren't important to me. And so I can see the merit of just doing away with belts as a whole. And it's kind of what you were talking about earlier too, where there's always that pecking order. There's always that thing where guys are trying to, level up against somebody else and all those kind of different things. So what are your thoughts about just getting rid of the whole belt system in regards to jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, anything that we do, there's always some kind of like, not a stack ranking, but like, we could all look around and be like, oh yeah, well this is, in the group of 7 of us, we all know where we fall in this pecking order, right? The problem with that is the outside that group of 7, right? So if somebody from that 7 goes to another group, like, there's no quick understanding of where that person lines up. At the same time, belts are only as good as the person they're on, right? We had this in the Marine Corps. We have belts.
Well, hold on real quick. You just said like, that if that guy goes outside of the group, there's no way. I mean, that's what jiu-jitsu is.
Totally.
It's like, as soon as I came to Tennessee and started training there, because I don't care what belts people are.
Totally.
I don't even look at what belts people are. As soon as I start rolling with somebody, I know immediately where they're at.
Yeah.
I know whether or not I'm going to be helping this person with their jiu-jitsu or this person's going to be me with my jiu-jitsu.
Right. Yeah. Am I learning or teaching at this point?
Yeah. So it's a really easy way to understand somebody because it's just instantaneous. Like within first 30 seconds, I know whether or not this is, what we're doing. And it has nothing to do with the belt that they have on.
So then I'll go at it from a different aspect. Let's leave the actual physicality and skill level of the belts out. Let's leave the better person's a higher belt and all that stuff. I think that I think the main reason why we've probably always had belts in in a lot of martial arts is people like to progress. And I think that it psychologically does something when you can see you're improving, right? I mean, almost everything that we do at work, there are not necessarily ranks, but there are different titles, right? Hey, I'm an associate. I'm a team lead. I'm a manager, a senior manager, director, a senior director, VP, senior VP, all that shit, right? So there's tiers in that. There are tiers in churches, right? Churches have tiers, right? Is this a deacon? Is this a, whatever? That's all I really know.
I was going to say, I can't offer much there. Sure, they got tiers.
Yeah,
in
let's
churches.
go somewhere else, right? In education, you've got I've got an associate's, a bachelor's. It's just a label for what we believe that level of experience and stuff to be, right? Now, somebody who's got a PhD in underwater basket weaving is different than somebody who's got a PhD in astrophysics, right? Which is why you would say, I'm a doctor. I have a doctorate in, of what? Well, underwater basket weaving. We don't want to talk about that part. But I think that humans as a whole like progression. And I think that's why I think belts work really well for that. It gives them something to work towards, right? It gives them the goal. People like accomplishments. So if it was hey, you're just going to start doing this thing, and at some point in the next 6 to 15 years, we're going to give you a black belt, and that'll signify that you're a black belt, right? I don't think you'd get a lot of people to finish that. I don't think you'd get a lot of people there because there wouldn't be this consistent progression. There's no gamification.
See, I mean, I'm the fucking poster boy for no belts.
But you're the guy, I don't think there's a lot of people who are as enlightened as you in that aspect.
But all the things you're talking about, and I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit because I definitely think that there's an argument to be said that we don't need them anymore, that they no longer serve a purpose. Because I can walk in somewhere and I don't need to know who is the black belt, who's the purple belt. I don't need to know any of those things. I just know all of that information when we start rolling.
Yep.
And the way that I progress is the people that I couldn't submit yesterday, I can submit today. Mm-hmm. And that's how I know that I'm getting better. And so for me, it was always I kept coming back to jiu-jitsu over and over and over again not to get a black belt, not for the belt, but so that I could get better at the experience. I could get better at jiu-jitsu.
At jiu-jitsu, yeah.
And the way that I knew that was because there were people that I couldn't submit yesterday that I could now submit today. Mm-hmm. And then that just kept going, right? Where it was I just kept finding more and more people that were harder to submit. Mm-hmm. And that intent, then I had to learn. So the belt never meant anything, never had any point or purpose. It was just simply I just got better and better at jiu-jitsu simply because I wanted to get better at jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's a lot to be said that, because the mentality behind it too, if we could separate because I feel there's a lot of toxicity around the mentality behind it. For example, at the school, at the gym right now, and I don't know if it's still hanging up there, but there was a sign that was this drinking fountain is for white belts only. Yeah. And that made me feel like I was a child. That made me feel do you know what I mean? The whole idea that somebody is going to tell me that
I can't do this because
of this thing, right?
Yeah.
That mentality is the thing that I think no longer is serving people at all.
That part I agree.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally. Now I also laughed.
I did I get the laughter, the humor part of it. But it's I feel there's just something there where we could do things in such a different way where we don't have to have that component of it built into it. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think we can separate those two things because they're so enmeshed in society where it's the person who's a black belt is always going to be better than the person who's a white belt. And instead of looking at them as two people that are on the same level, just one of them has done more jiu-jitsu than the other person. And that person that hasn't done that much jiu-jitsu can eventually get to that spot if they just want to keep doing jiu-jitsu.
Totally. I think that there's I totally see the point of what you're at no point do I think that somebody who is, because you have a black belt, are you any better as a individual than somebody who is a white belt, right?
I've submitted a lot of black belts.
Totally.
a lot of people with black belts who I have zero problem submitting.
Yeah.
And have for a very long time in my jiu-jitsu game.
Yeah, totally.
It
Right.
was like,
Yeah. You're like, yeah, whatever.
yeah.
Listen, I look forward to those moments, right? It's my favorite thing to do when traveling. I'm like, oh yeah, this would be great.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see what you, and listen, sometimes
Yeah.
I'm like, all right.
Right. And that has nothing to do with the belt.
Nothing.
Like there's totally, squared away people that it's like, there's a lot of people that are blue belts or purple belts that you got to work hard. Right.
Yeah. I agree with all that. I think that's a cultural thing that we will always be fighting. Why is this person who's been part of this group more important than this person who has just joined the group? And I don't know if there's anything that we can do except intentionally try to remove that kind of stigma and stuff like that, right? This is like one of the things I was listening to somebody talk about this, and I was at a conference in Sacramento, at a martial arts conference, and somebody said something, they're like, yeah, and it just cracked me up. He's like, if I drop into one more school and I listen to some 29-year-old black belt tell me all about the benefits of doing life this way while he's living in his mom's basement, I'm going to gouge my eyes out, right? Be like, yeah, I'm a 40-year-old blue belt who doesn't care what your thoughts are on life because you've been in a martial art, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not the purpose. You're better at this part, right? Like, I have 2 kids and all that. Like, we're playing different games.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, so I think that a lot of that's on the stigma of the culture of what you're creating, right? Obviously, I don't think that anybody who is one rank versus another rank, anybody is different there. But where I do think that, going back to the idea of like, why do we have belts, right? I think for you who've got, you've got 20 plus years of jiu-jitsu experience over, because you started doing this a while ago.
Yeah.
I think it might have started, did the first number start with a 1, in the year?
No, I think it was 2002 or 2003 is when I started.
Okay, right. So you've got all this time of experience, and you are at this, you started with a group where that wasn't a big deal, and you've kind of come through that. The kids that we have come in today, it's really hard to explain to their parents what's the difference between the white belt with 2 stripes and the gray belt with a black stripe and 2 stripes, right? They just understand, hey, there's a ranking associated with this, and this comes from time and experience. And so that can help them understand what's going on. At the same time, those little kids get super excited when they get a stripe, right? Like, that's, I think, one of the many benefits of the belt system is, if the end of the day, my goal was to get as many people to do jiu-jitsu as possible. Actually, let me rephrase. That is my goal right now. I want to get as many people in McMinn County, Tennessee, to do jiu-jitsu as possible at Athens Jiu-Jitsu, right? If I can get 100 people to come in, and I need to use a belt system to keep those kids engaged and to keep them coming in, my hope would be at some point they would maybe get to the realization, okay, hey, this doesn't, make, like I've explained to my son, right, who is a gray belt with a black stripe, like, hey, man, you are no better than anybody else. Do you know more jiu-jitsu than some of these guys? Absolutely. But that does not make you a better person. It does not make you a more important person or anything like that, right? So that's a lesson that, like, he needs to learn, and that I think children in general should learn. But if that is what keeps a kid, if a kid comes into class every day, he's like, man, I hope I get a stripe today, right? And that's what's motivating them, because they're not at the place of clarity to, like, well, I'm just getting better, right? Like that you have, because you're a 44-year-old male with a lot of clarity in that kind of space, right? The 9-year-old snot-nosed punk who has no idea what's going on, like, if they need that little bit, like, let them have it. It's...
See, I think of it this way, though, because I'm comparing it to, like, other sports and other activities, and the way that you get better at baseball is you just play baseball more. And the way that you know that you're better at baseball is because you're better at baseball. Do you know what I mean? And you're progressing in the sense of, like, I'm participating in different levels of baseball, but nobody comes up and says, well, here's your white hat, here's your blue hat, here's your purple hat.
But they've got like D1, D2.
Yeah, they've got levels to it, right?
Right, yeah.
So I can totally see like,
there's varsity, JV.
Exactly.
Right?
All of those things are very similar in the sense of, but as far as like, especially kids, I think that when it comes to kids, I don't think it's needed at all. I think kids will show up and do it simply for the pure love of doing this thing that is this physical activity. And you said the parents, and I think that's what it is. I think the parents want that structure because what am I paying for? What do you know, I'm bringing my kid here every week for what? Right. Well, it's so that they get all of these benefits that jiu-jitsu brings.
Yeah.
Right. It's not so that they have a belt. It's not so that they have a stripe. It's just simply so that they have all these amazing benefits that jiu-jitsu brings. And then if the kid never sees belts and thinks about it from the perspective of belts, and there's not some structure built into it where we're all lining up along the wall based off of the belt system that we have, and there's all this hierarchy, and then there's the people at the front of the class. Like the person at the front of the class is just the person teaching the class. Do you know what I mean? Who cares what his belt is? If he's got a knowledge base where he can teach it effectively, not to one person, but to the entire class.
Yeah, totally.
Right? You have to be able to take your jiu-jitsu and teach it to the 4-year-old as well as to the 40-year-old.
Totally.
And meet them wherever they're at, right?
Yeah,
that's
I think that's a
good
different
teacher.
I agree with that. I think that's a different aspect, though, because I wouldn't... Because you're a black belt doesn't make you a great instructor, but great instructors aren't always black belts, right? Like I agree that there's a difference there, but I still would think like, I think about like watching kids play video games, right? Like there are levels in video games, and you get like there's the easy, a hard, an expert, and then like a God mode or whatever. Like, and you're even like Call of Duty, like I'm a level 70, like I prestiged, right, which is a big deal, and people would work towards those things to show, and maybe that's how people see that worth is because they're not at a spot where they can see the worth in just as what it is that they're doing. But they can see they need to have the label to see the worth, right? The same as where somebody might look at somebody who has been in business for 30 years and is like, I've been in business for 30 years. I run a multi-million-dollar company, like boom, 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 boom. Like, oh, okay, cool. But at the same time, if they might not get hired by an application because they don't have a bachelor's, right? They've put a label to something.
Yeah.
And is that necessarily right? Like, no, but that's... At the same time, that's kind of the systems that we like live within.
I'm ready to bust them all down.
I know you are.
I'm so ready to burn them all to the ground.
I'm like,
there's a part of me too, though. Like, I'll be honest with you. I never, because belts weren't a thing back in the day when I trained, and it's not to say they weren't a thing. It was.
I just they've been a thing for a long time.
Yeah, I just never trained gi, right? And so it was never a thing that was built into my jiu-jitsu because it just wasn't there.
Yeah,
I knew that it existed. I knew that was a thing, obviously, But to be honest, when the guy that gave me my first belt, his name's Keith Asbury, he owns Tooele Martial Arts Academy in Utah. And when he was like, hey, we're going to start doing this thing for no-gi. And he's like, I'm going to, I can't just give you, like a black belt. Like, we got to start you off. Like everybody here is going to be really pissed off if Craig just comes in and, so I got to give you a blue belt and then we'll give you a purple belt and so on and so forth. And and it definitely sparked that part of me that was like, fuck yeah, right? I recognize the sense of accomplishment. I recognize all of those things that come in association with it. But then I also recognize the other part of like my ego and the other part inside of me that's like, do you know what I mean? I like standing up at the front of the class as a brown belt. I like being in that position as well. So it's for me also that internal struggle back and forth. And I just wish overall we could kind of do away, not just with belts, but like we're talking about kind of in this other labels and structure. And because it's such I don't really think it's needed. I just really don't. And I think the illusion is that it is needed. And that if we do away with all of those things, and then it's just going to be chaos. And how do we keep track of things? And how do people know where they stand? And all those kind of things. And I think it's very much like jiu-jitsu, right? Where it's obvious where you stand as soon as you roll with somebody. And so it's the same thing. It's obvious. I'm not going to go play D1 baseball right now, right?
Yeah.
It's obvious if I go and show up. And I think that's the way it should be, right? I'm really good at pickleball, but there's people that I can't play pickleball with now.
Mhm.
I think I should have the opportunity to go play pickleball with them.
Yeah.
But it's going to be really obvious to me that I need to go play with these other people some more, right? I need to practice and do some other things.
Before I come up to this,
right, before I go and participate at this other level.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of like how nature works, where you have to learn all of these things and it's just a progression. And, you know, you try and then nature tells you, you need to try a little bit harder. You're not quite there yet. I think that system is already built into us as human beings, as animals, however we want to, you know, look at us.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to now structure it around all of these other things that we've used in order to kind of place people above each other.
Yeah.
I think that's the part that I really struggle with.
I get that. And I definitely like, I see that, right, is we are putting people in rank and file, you know, like that sometimes like nobody likes to be the last ranked, right? And people, whether they believe it or like, people like to be the top ranked person, right?
Yeah,
like there's because that ego will always be there. And I don't know if the ego, I don't think ego is always bad.
Yeah.
Right. I think that
either.
there's some benefits to ego. And the like where that motivation's coming from, right? For that, I do think that it would be, if we look at, do I think that it's possible to have a school and all that without any kind of belts? And will people just naturally kind of figure things out? Yeah, I do. I don't know how great of a, I don't want to say experience, how everyone else will adhere to that, right? It's really interesting because so right now, like, so my first gym that I owned was a CrossFit school, right? CrossFit gym. There's no ranks in what we were doing. It's like, hey, and even I say that there's no ranks. We had fundamentals people, we had beginners, and we had RX, and then there was even RX plus. So there really were, hey, what workout did you do? And there was a rank to those. And you could go up. There were days where like, oh yeah, this is a heavier weight, but less gymnastics. I'm going to do that one. There's more gymnastics, lighter weights. Like, I'm probably going to go down a tick or two because that looks hard.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's sometimes like, I just don't have that kind of work capacity in me today. So I'm going to do the super easy stuff. But there is an idea. There's a company out there called Level Method, and they are teaching CrossFit with a belt structure.
Really?
And it's really great for if you're brand new and you don't know how to do anything, here's your workout. And your workout is these basic things that you know. And when you get to, because they test them, and they'll say, hey, to get to a yellow belt, you need to be able to jump on a 20-inch box with 2 feet. You need to be able to do all these things. And then you're considered a yellow belt. Now, when you get to yellow belt, here's your workout. So it's prescriptive. It's not a I'm this and you're that, but this is the workout that's best suited for me based on my abilities. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
And they're putting that rank into a way that is individualizing the prescription for their health and wellness. I think that's super cool, right? But at the same time, it's like, well, with that method, the person who can't do, let's call it a pull-up, their workout calls for ring rows. Well, why can't we challenge them to do this workout with pull-ups in there and let them live in that for a minute, right? To push on them. Why can't they make that decision, right? It's just one of those things. It's like, yeah, I don't know. This is how we're testing things, right? We're seeing how it works. I would love to talk to somebody, if you have a school, right, that is no rank.
Yeah.
Right? Like, let us know. Like, I'd love to hear more about how that works. And,
come on the podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, we would love to have you come on the podcast and talk about it.
Because I would love to learn more, like, and this is going to go two ways. Like, how does that work within your community? And then at the second time is, how does that work for you as a business, right? As a school, like, if somebody looked at me and they're like, hey, we've got this awesome school, we don't do any ranks, it's just come in and roll, but we never get above 40 people. Or there's the hey, we've got this super rank and file like testing for belts,
Yeah.
right? Pedro Sauer's gyms normally test for belts, right? Like, hey, we do this. But every Pedro Sauer gym that I talk to has got 500 members in it. And you're like, who is it? And it could be the inverse at the same time. It could be the gym that does the ranks has got 50 or less, you know. And it could be the gym with no ranks has got 500. I don't know. But in that aspect, and this is a guy that I met in CrossFit who actually used to own. I want to say he's a world champion taekwondo or kickboxer or something like that. Owned a bunch of gyms back in the day in Florida. Got into CrossFit. His name is JP. Super smart guy. Lives in Nashville now. JP had somebody walk into his gym. He had LA, or it was CrossFit Brick in LA, and he had 100 people in a class. And a guy from a gym down the road came in and looked at him. He's like, "You've got almost no one in this class that's doing an actual, real good squat, but you got 100 people in here trying to squat." And JP looked at him. He's like, "Yeah," and he kind of was like, "Fuck, like, what are we doing? None of these guys know how to actually squat." And he was like, "Cool." And it wasn't until he thought about it, is my job, it's a sliding scale. I can show 5 people how to do a perfect air squat, or I can teach 1,000 people to move. Where do I want to be on that scale? Because I can tell you that I cannot teach 1,000 people how to air squat
1,000
perfect.
people aren't going to do it.
You're just not going to do it.
Yeah, they're not
but if I can get
interested.
1,000 people moving, and maybe of those, eventually I can get more people into this. Do I want to have this very unique, specific reach, or do I want to have a grander, broader reach where I can influence more?
Yeah, that's a good argument for the belt system there. I
Yeah.
can see the benefit of that. And again, I'm just like, man, I wish we would do it with.
Right?
I see that it, at least from my lens, I feel like it causes more problems than it fixes. I don't feel like it's solving a lot of things. I feel like it's creating a lot of things. But again, right?
I mean, it's super hard too, because what our belts are may not be, a guy I work with, Tom Hill, trained under, he was Andrew Gavala's strength coach, trained at Altos. There's no L.
I don't know.
It's
I've never heard
ATOS,
of
I
it.
think. It's he like 6 or 5-time world ADC champion in the ultra, or in this heavyweight division. Super strong guy. He was his strength coach. Tom, phenomenal guy, very strong individual. Tom was training there and was a blue belt and was doing a lot of competitions, and then hurt his shoulder. And as far as I can kind of figure out, like, stopped competing, and they just stopped progressing him as a belt because he wasn't doing the competitions. Like, is that, so you might have somebody who is, they're a blue belt and they just walk in and crush everybody. Well, that blue belt's got 6 years experience training 3, 4, 5 times a week.
Right.
Right. But because that academy has a sandbagging approach to this, hey, we'll only promote you when you win worlds.
Yeah.
Right. It's like,
yeah, that's the other thing too, is, I mean, we'll never come up with the thing that's going to be adopted across the board. Right.
yeah.
It's just not the case. Everybody's going to do what they want to do and do it how they do it. And I mean, we see that now with the belt system as a whole as well. Right.
Yeah.
People are doing it exactly the way that they want to do it in the gyms and the schools that they own and that they operate. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's the way it should be.
I will give the shout out to jiu-jitsu as a whole. I do believe in the process that we have kind of in place. As I was just explaining to somebody, like, what's the big difference? Like there's no kids walking around with black belts.
Yeah.
Right now, in taekwondo or karate or whatever, somebody who's been training 3 years who dropped $4,000 on belt testing and all that, like, yeah, that kid's a 3rd-degree black belt. Parents think this kid's a lethal weapon walking around, and you're like, nah, man. Like,
yeah, that's what I've always loved about jiu-jitsu, is it's just the great equalizer.
Oh yeah.
It's the thing that just tells you, it's the truth teller.
Oh yeah.
As soon as
there's no lying in jiu-jitsu.
There's no. And everybody could try and everybody could say what they want to say and everything like that. But at the end of the day, yeah, you're gonna see it all immediately.
Yeah.
As soon as you start rolling.
If somebody walks in, they're like, oh yeah, I'm a brown belt. And as soon as you start putting like you said, I know where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you're like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even care. Like I said, when I came here, I was, it doesn't even bother me. I just like rolling. This has been great, dude.
This has been awesome.
I'm excited. I'm excited for the gym. I'm looking forward to everything.
I appreciate
So,
it.
like you said, go check out Athens Jiu-Jitsu in McMinn County. And yeah, now's the time.
Now's the time.
Get on the mat.
Right? Yeah. I mean, really, it's like 2025. Hey, let's start this year off with a choke. No, no, I'm super excited. I think we've got I'm really looking forward to everything that we're trying to do. And I think that I was sharing with the morning crew this morning, like, what's my goal is to build a community full of impact. Like, that's really what I want. Like, obviously it would be really cool if the gym like could pay for itself, and my wife would hate me less if that happened.
It will be really cool when it does. Yeah. I feel like I have seen your big vision.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's really beautiful. I'm going to be really excited to see that thing come to life, because it's going to help and change a lot of people's lives for the better, man.
I appreciate that. I really hope so. That's really, as I've shared with a lot of people, like, my internal, like, super personal intrinsic goal is, like, I want to do everything I can to help eliminate type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Like, I think that physical fitness and just wellness, like, I believe that kids are better when they're training. I believe that adults are better when they're training. And I think that I want to just bring more and more of that around. I don't just want to, like, teach this kid some basic jiu-jitsu. I want to help the parents, get moving again. And I want to help with all these things. And that's what I want to do.
Yeah, dude. It's going to be awesome.
It'll be sweet.
Thank you, everybody. Go subscribe to Brave Mendare wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, if you really dig the podcast and you want to support the podcast, we now have a sponsor, Heritage Still. Go check them out. You can save 10% at their website. It's heritagestill.us/brave. Enter in promo code BRAVE and save 10%. Also, you don't have to do that. It's awesome if you do that. It's super awesome. The real thing that we really appreciate is just you listening to the podcast and sharing the podcast and commenting on the podcast. We love hearing from everybody, and all those comments and messages and emails and everything like that. That's really, really awesome. And truthfully, that's like all that we really ask.
Yeah.
Is just enjoy the show. We have fun doing it, and we like sharing it with all of you. So yeah, dude.
Awesome. This has been great, man. Love you. Boom.